And welcome to another podcast edition of Rosen Sports Monday, following a very difficult loss at home last night to the Atlanta Falcons. I am thrilled to have with me today a special guest, a guy who I covered as a reporter, hosted a show with, and been friends with for a long time, Scott Studwell, of course, the legendary Scott Studwell. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors, Lexus of Maplewood, Lexus of Wayzata, our good friend Charlie Swanson, and a new sponsor today we'll hear from a little bit later, Stretch Lab. That sounds like a good idea right now. Scotty Studwell. Oh, man, we're a couple old timers here.
Really? Well, speak for yourself now.
Well, we used to spend, I mentioned this is Rosen Sports Monday. We spent a few Sunday nights together.
Yes, we did.
Darren Nelson and Greg Coleman, one of my favorite times of doing that show, because we had you representing, of course, the defense, Darren representing the offense, and Greg Coleman sort of representing special teams. And all you guys would do was pick on him, and Darren, in that squeaky voice of his, would say, "What do you know? You're only a punter." And that's kind of the way that whole thing went. But, man, we had a blast. That really was a lot of fun.
Yes, we sure did. It was, it seems like eons ago that we did this, but and it probably is.
It is eons ago.
Yeah. But that's okay. It was a great time, and two great people, and actually three great people, yourself included.
Well,
but it was a nice way to spend a Sunday evening for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. And for those too young, speaking of age, young to remember number 55, ninth round draft pick, which we can talk about in a minute. I didn't know they had 9 rounds. 1977, 250th overall, played with the Vikings from 1977 to 1990, then went on to become the director of college scouting for a long time, I think for 17, 18 years or so. Vikings Ring of Honor, named one of the 50 greatest Vikings, all-time leading tackler, 1,981. In fact, Scott, I was reading up on your Wikipedia page. I hope it's correct. You had 24 tackles in one game versus Detroit. My God, are you kidding? Your arms must have been a little sore the next day.
and trust me, they're still sore. Yeah,
I bet they are.
That's the aging process.
Yeah,
it's catching up to me a little bit.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that a little bit later, but let's kind of dive into, because I saw you were a constant presence in the press box at home games. I always enjoy running into you before games and after the game, whatever it might be. Last night's, unfortunately, was a dud, losing to Atlanta. The stadium was wired for that home opener. Adam Thielen coming back, J.J. McCarthy's first start there, but it quickly short-circuited. Your takeaways from your vantage point and what you saw last night?
It was lackluster at best. Let's give Atlanta some credit.
Mm-hmm.
They basically won the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and they effectively ran the football. Bijan Robinson, he had a big game, and he's a heck of a back.
Yeah, it sure is.
He's got vision, balance, feet. He's patient, and he's powerful, and it was one of those nights that he was on his game and we weren't. And, unfortunately it kind of snowballed, in the second half. And, as maybe as poorly as we played, we were still in it until till the fourth quarter, and then it just kind of snowballed. But it's a tough loss. They're always a tough loss, and they've got to find a way to gather and get together and fix it. Fix the problems that they had yesterday and go forward. They got Tennessee coming in here this week, right?
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So,
yeah. With a backup quarterback, a
so
former Viking quarterback, Jake Browning, who went in. Joe Burrow's out for 3 months now. So
yeah, so I mean, they're unfortunate. That's unfortunate for Cincy, but that's a break for us, and
mhm.
hopefully they can take advantage of it.
Well, Atlanta, you're right. Atlanta, Scott Studwell did everything to kind of keep the Vikings in the game, but Minnesota just could not capitalize on their opportunities. There were, few and far between, but they got down the 2-yard line. They had, kind of a false start. They had to delay a game. They had a sack. Things were just going south, and they just could not capitalize. JJ missed a wide open Jalen Naylor, which would have been a 72-yard touchdown. So the little things added up to big things, and it's unusual to see the Vikings get shut down as far as scoring, not scoring any touchdowns at home. But, speaking of J.J. McCarthy, I mean, he's had what you would characterize, I guess, as 7 very ordinary quarters, one really good one against the Bears a week ago. He's not a true rookie. The Vikings are going to allow him to mature on the field. I was just discussing with our producer Alex about that there used to be a time when rookies would kind of watch, Bud Grant, who you played for. So these rookies would sit on the bench for a while. Not that way for the most part anymore. You draft them, you play them. And do you sense that J.J. McCarthy is experiencing the same sort of situations and growing pains that a lot of young quarterbacks do?
Well, yeah, I mean, he missed all the last season, and he had a pretty he had a good debut in Chicago, and especially in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
And he just he seemed a little off. Yet last night, he's got all the physical tools that he needs to be a good player in this league. I think he's wired right.
Mm-hmm.
He says and does all the right things, but he needs some seasoning. And the only way you can get it is on Sundays and game days, and let's not be too critical of his performance, but I guarantee you that he knows he can play better. But they, protection, they had some breakdowns in protection, and he wasn't on his game, and the guy he and his fiance just had a baby,
Right.
and
Short week, the whole thing.
he's got a lot on his plate. Yeah, I'm not trying to excuse his performance, but he's going to be the first one to tell you that he needs to play better.
And Scott, do you subscribe to the theory, like I just discussed, about when you draft a player like that, and JJ sat and watched last year, that you're better off having him get out there and playing if he's your future quarterback, as opposed to bringing back a Sam Darnold, having signed an Aaron Rodgers? That George Allen used to say the future's now, and there's a lot of guys in this football team that want to win and want to win now, and obviously the coach does and the management does. But are you better off just letting this kid kind of grow with the team, or would you have been better off bringing back a Sam Darnold?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question and a tricky situation to deal with. And Sam had a great year last year, and give Kevin and his staff a lot of credit for resurrecting his career.
Mm-hmm.
But it's they took a gamble on the fact that JJ was going to be ready, and they
Mm-hmm.
saw a lot of things in JJ that prompted that move. So only time will tell, but it's let's not push the panic button here. He's 2 games into hopefully a long, successful career. So,
Well, and it certainly would help if they got some healthy bodies back, in particular left tackle Christian Darrisaw, Ryan Kelly, their starting center, went down with a concussion last night. He's had some issues before coming to Minnesota. Blake Cashman's out for a while. Harrison Smith, their leader on defense in the secondary, has been out with some personal health issue that he hopefully will be back Sunday. Jordan Addison serving a 3-game suspension. So there's a lot of other stuff, when you're going on the job training that you need to have your you'd love to have your full complement of players, although we know what life is like in the NFL. It just doesn't happen all that often.
No, it doesn't. And, people need to realize that, these guys played maybe a quarter and a half the first preseason game.
Right.
And
right.
there's a lot of new faces and without a lot of playing time together that these guys played a quarter and a half in the first preseason game and you can't simulate that in practice in training camp and it's they have to be game ready and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, it is. There's 100%. And people don't have patience. There are a lot of Viking fans on the ledge already today after one game, one loss. And, that's kind of the way it goes around the league, though. People push that panic button immediately. And I think people are looking, the Vikings are in trouble. Well, they got to play another game, and they're favored by 4 points, and they go over Cincinnati on Sunday. So we will see. Speaking of injuries, and we in the media would look. Every Wednesday the injury list comes out. I don't recall when you played, and you played a long time for Bud Grant in particular. NFL requiring teams to release injury lists the week of the games because it was kind of hidden under wraps whether somebody was experiencing a concussion or some other ailment. I don't think many people found out about it. Do you remember having injury lists that had to be released?
No, I don't think there was ever anything released in the news media or in the paper or and if anybody was going to dig it up, it would have been Sid. But
he dug up everything. Yeah.
But it's. The game has changed considerably and in a lot of good ways and maybe in not a lot of good ways, but those injury lists are important for game planning, especially if they've like Burrow is hurt in Cincinnati. I mean, that's obviously a huge loss for them, but and you have to prepare for the next man up and but there aren't many secrets anymore in this game.
Well, and the league has taken extraordinary steps to protect in theory protect the players. I mean, look at Ryan Kelly's a perfect example. He went out last night in the concussion protocol. There are people who identify behavior on the field based from the press box who are observers. And, I think, again, going back to your era, everything has changed and probably for the good. The players who played through concussions that you played with and probably you experienced, my God, look at the number of tackles you had in your career. You had a lot of collisions. And so far,
you ran over a few times,
Yeah, you ran over a few people, too, though. But you look at this as obviously a positive step to protect the health of the players because the concussion aspect of it has been, very detrimental to the long-range health of a lot of your former players and teammates.
Yeah, and yes, it's the right thing to do. It's the right way to go about your business. The protecting the players is certainly paramount on everybody's list, and but if you play a violent game and you play it long enough and there's always that chance that you're going to have health problems down the line and I wake up every day with a new ache and pain and but it's okay. I'd do it. I'd do it again tomorrow if I could. It was the best job I ever had, and I would venture to say that 95% of the players that are playing today would tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
It's Well, it's just football's a violent game, and everybody that plays it, and everybody that coaches it, and everybody that watches it understands that, and the guys that participate in these games
Mm-hmm.
on any given Sunday, that it could be a career-ending day. So it's the medical staffs do a great job. They do everything they can to protect these players, but there's always going to be injuries.
Well, Scott, you played for head coach, the legendary Bud Grant, who was not known for playing rookies too often. What do you recall about your first year playing under Bud, and how much playing time you got, or was it just special teams? I honestly don't remember. I remember Jeff Seaman was probably the starting middle linebacker.
Well, but my first season in '77, we had 6 preseason games.
Oh my goodness, that's right.
And I remember Bud telling the whole team that everybody was going to play in the very first game, and none of the rookies got in.
Oh boy.
So, to me, it was I was thinking about it, and I was like, I think after the fact, that this was kind of Bud's way to tell you that he's in charge, and when he wants you to be ready to play,
right,
you're going to play. So, it was just he was a master in saying as little as he could with but still being able to get his point across. And he was one of those guys, he'd just look at you the wrong way, and you'd almost go to the bathroom.
Yeah. He had that effect. He had those steely blue eyes of his would bore a hole through the back of your head.
And he was just, he wasn't a screamer. He wasn't a yeller. He very rarely raised his voice, and he could just give you that look that would just make you quiver. And there was no question who was in charge and who was the leader of that football team, and who was in charge. And he was, he was a master at that, and reading people and knowing how to be close with a handful of players on the team, and it was just whatever Bud, and I didn't really learn this until I was probably done playing, but it was just everything that he said made sense.
Mm-hmm. He had more common sense than any man I've ever met in my life, and I was intimidated by him and in awe of him, and then becoming close later in his life, and was really one of the most extraordinary things I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, man.
He certainly was. The Vikings, as you know, have back-to-back games in Europe this year, regular season games coming up early in a few weeks in Dublin, and then London. And I remember you guys playing an exhibition game or two back in the day. I think were you on the team that played in Sweden? I don't know if you were on the London.
I think we played in London and Sweden.
Yeah, you did. That's right.
Yep.
Well, Scott, would you have ever imagined that the NFL would be so locked into playing regular season games in Europe after what you experienced many, many years ago in a preseason game or two in Europe? Because the fans were not that acclimated or knew that much about NFL football at that time.
Well, it's a big business, and it's all about the money, and not all about the money, but it's trying to expand into different markets other than the one that they were in for a number of years. And it's it's the changing of the guard, so to speak, and there's fans all over the world that follow the NFL. It's a great game. It's out there and it's ever present, and it's especially during football season and even in the off season. I mean, they're promoting everything about the league and the draft, and it's just it's 24/7, 365, and it's I mean, it's just it's a 24/7 game anymore, and they've got tentacles in everywhere, all over the world, and it's not just a USA game anymore. It's a worldwide game, and it's and that's I guess that's where we're going with this thing, but it's not going to turn back anymore,
Right.
and it's the mom and pop shops anymore, and ownership, and it's just it's a spectacle.
We're talking with the Vikings legend Scott Studwell. Speaking of legend, we're going to take a break right now, but coming up this week, a big week. It's Legends Week for the Minnesota Vikings, and in particular, we're going to be honoring the captain, the one and only Jim Marshall, and I want to get Scott's views on his former teammate, a man who was kind of a cut above the rest, number 70, Jim Marshall. So we're going to take our break right now, and Scott, stay with us. We're going to hear from our friends at Lexus of Maplewood and Lexus of Wayzata. But first, new sponsor that we have, Stretch Lab. I want to tell a little personal story. My nephew in New Jersey gave me a guest pass when we were visiting a couple months ago. He knew I was dealing with some back pain, so I went to the local Stretch Lab in New Jersey for my 50-minute session, and I felt so good afterwards that when I came back home, I immediately called the Stretch Lab in Eden Prairie where my nephew first signed up, and I've been hooked ever since. Now, there are locations throughout the Twin Cities, but I've stuck with my Tuesday morning appointment with Jason. It's really works out well with my schedule. It's close to a 50-minute kind of meditation session. Jason stretches out my legs, my hips, my back, my neck. You get older, you hurt everywhere. My traps, all of it. And I feel like a new man every time. I mean, my nephew's in his late 20s. I'm just a little bit older, but it doesn't matter. Stretching is so important on our daily routines. Now, and having an expert do the work is the only way to go. My advice, give Stretch Lab a chance to improve your overall health. Check out a location near you. Now let's hear from our friends at Lexus of Maplewood and Wayzata. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with two great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to LexusofWayzata.com or LexusofMaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today.
Hey everyone, John Krasinski here to celebrate with you that football season is finally upon us. Join me on the Viking Update Show for all the latest action, insights, and stories from the field. Jim Suin and I will have everything you need on our podcast on the Talk North Podcast Network.
And welcome back to Scott Studwell. Scott, I mentioned before we went to our break about Legends Week, and in particular, a big week to honor the legacy and the life of Jim Marshall, who passed away a few months ago, and someone that I got to be really close with as well because of my wife and just my relationship with Jim over the years. And I know as a former teammate of yours, what high regard. I mean, sometimes you hear about people and after they pass, their image and their legacy kind of just grows by leaps and bounds. He was bigger than life when he was alive, was he not?
They've coined this term or this phrase, legend.
Right.
And, to me, Jim Marshall is the legend for Minnesota Vikings football. He's You know, I got the opportunity to play with him for
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years. You know, and here's a guy that was probably, you know, I was coming in here at what, 22 years old,
Right.
and I think Jim may have been almost 40,
Mm-hmm.
if not
Mm-hmm.
40 or close to 40. And you know, here's a guy that played 19 years for the Vikings and never missed a game.
Think about
You
that.
know,
We were just talking about
and
injury lists. The guy, there was no such thing with Jim.
yeah, and you know, and there were games that he should have missed 4 or 5 weeks.
Mm.
You know, and just he was a phenomenal person, and just a unbelievable teammate. Just and he wasn't, you know, he was anytime Bud entrusts the locker room to a certain individual, you know, and it took time for me to learn all this, but I mean, for Bud to relinquish the locker room to Jim
Mm.
and let Jim run the locker room, it was, you know, I mean, that in itself is one of the highest tributes that you could pay anybody. And you know, for Bud to relinquish the trust in Jim, and you know, he was just and he wasn't, you know, he wasn't a rah-rah guy, and he wasn't a locker room lawyer, and he wasn't, you know, if Bud needed Jim to say something to a certain player, he'd pull him aside and do it in private, you know, and he was just he had he commanded so much respect from all the players, you know, and these were guys, even, you know, with Allen and Moose and Krause and you know, Wally Hilgenberg. I mean, just all those guys were Jim's guys, you know, and just there's guys like him don't come along very often, and I was just, you know, so fortunate to be able to be around him, absorb as much as I could. And back, you know, back at hell, I was 23 years old, or
Yeah.
you know, a lot of things weren't very impressionable to me at the time, but he always was, and he's what the Vikings, he epitomizes the Minnesota Vikings.
One of the last interviews I had a chance to do with Bud it was at U.S. Bank. He referred to Jim Marshall as my bell cow. I mean, he was the leader. He knew, as you just said, he would entrust him with everything and be the leader in that locker room. And that didn't come easily for Bud, but he recognized that he was the captain, and that others, called him the bell cow, would follow his lead as whether he had a word for you, like a word of encouragement, a criticism, whatever it might be. That's a unique thing to be able to play at that high level. 270 straight starts, just it's just mind-boggling. We're talking about injury lists and players out for various times, but more than that, and getting to know him, you just kind of stood up a little straighter when you were around Jim Marshall.
Well, you know, he was the ultimate free spirit.
Oh,
you
boy.
know, and
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, he left no stones unturned, and you know, just had a remarkable life. You know, aside from the fact that he had a remarkable career, and you know, I've kind of lost a little bit of respect for the for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And you know, Jared Allen, we just celebrated Jared Allen getting in yesterday, and rightfully so, and understandably so. And Jared was a great player, and but you know, I've just it's kind of lost a little bit of its luster when they keep bypassing Jim, and you know, and I do understand it to a certain extent, but you know, the merits of him playing as many games as he did, and with never missing a game, and I mean, this is the Iron Man's Iron Man.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The Hall of Fame should be ashamed of itself, the voters, because
I think
you know,
so
before
too.
you don't have to look at, you know, even pure stats all the time. If you look at Jim Marshall's career, he's a Hall of Famer. End of story.
Yep.
You know, I had the pleasure of his beautiful wife Susan had me over to the house over the weekend, and I was going through some of it. She was going through some of the stuff that I had, including some old Bob Lurtsema Viking Report magazines. But one of them, those were beauties, mostly because the ads are so great. You know, they're selling a car for like $3,000, new car or whatever. It might be a Lupien Olds or something. But you know, and I know this great picture that Jim's last day, his last game at Met Stadium, and there you are, one of the two guys that were carrying him off the field, the number 70. And what a picture that is. I mean, that's one I would love to have in my collection. It's the respect oozes out of that picture, Scott. That must be quite a thrill for you.
You know, and I've got that same picture, and it's probably a 30 by 30 hanging on my wall over a desk.
Yeah.
And you know, and I was for years I was meaning to give that to Jim, or at least ask him if he wanted it. And you know, and lesson learned, you know, you just don't wait because you never know. But it's, you know, I love that picture. I love Sudsy and Jim and Brent McClanahan, I think, is in the picture as well. And you know, it would be nothing. I would love to give that to the Marshall family if they want it. And I'm sure they probably have a copy of it somewhere.
I think they do, but they have I mean, Jim has a treasure trove of incredible pictures that Susan, his wife, showed me down in their basement, and it's like walking into a shrine. I mean, really is not just about him, about his teammates, and you know, pictures at Met Stadium on the 4 autographs, the Purple People Leaders autograph over the marquee at Met Stadium, and I got goosebumps because that was my life, that was my childhood, that was everything. And Jim, getting to know Jim as a man and as a person, as a friend, is extraordinary. And I know this Legends Week is going to honor Jim and the memory of Jim Marshall. But beyond that, for you, what does it mean to run into a lot of teammates? It's kind of the ultimate reunion, if you want to call it that. It's kind of college reunion when you get together with your former teammates. And it goes too fast, Scotty. I mean, it's just here we are in our 70s. Damn.
I know.
It just does. Got to appreciate all of it.
It's you know, it's at some points it's sad, at some points it's happy, at some points it's joyous. It's, you know, the memories come flooding back, and you know, it's just it's so nice to see everybody with a big smile on their face, and because everything comes flooding back, you know, all the emotions and all the things that you shared together, and you don't get that in a normal business setting,
right?
And
you certainly don't.
And even personal settings. I mean, it's just it's you know, these are former teammates, and they're great friends, and you may not have spoken or seen one for 10 or 15 years, and everything comes flooding back, and it's an exceptional weekend. Tom and Tracy and the Wilfs do such a great job taking care of the legends, and I'm not sure if I'm bought into the legend part of that statement, but it's just, the alumni are just
right.
it's great to see everybody, and it's you can always count on Ricky being Ricky and Ahmad
Ricky
being
Young.
Ahmad,
Oh, yeah,
and
for sure.
Tommy being Tommy, and and it's just it's Kraus complaining about something,
Of course. Doesn't change.
And it's something that not everybody can appreciate, but the people that have been there and done that certainly do appreciate it.
Well, it'd be a special weekend. And Scott, I'm so glad life is good for you. You finally got off the road after all those years, and you're enjoying your family and grandkids. And last time I ran into you over TC during this training camp, you were talking about that as well. So I treasure your friendship. I really appreciate it. And I thank you so much for joining us today and spending some time recalling your career and teammates, and look forward to future great days with you. Thanks, Scotty.
All right, Rosie. Hey, listen, buddy. I love you, and and we go back a long way, and I cherish your friendship as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you think I did outkick my coverage with Karin as well. So that I agree with that 100%. Thanks, my friend.
I'm glad you said it, not me.
Thanks, Scotty. Appreciate it.
All right, buddy.
One and only
All
Scott
right.
Studwell.